Yeah, thanks. I made all a bunch of my work device. I slip on the ice and damage my work device. So yeah, maybe keep them somewhere else now, right? Yeah. Thanks. You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you guys for being here, both in person and online. Tonight's talk is going to be something that I have talked about before, but I'm going to go into some stuff that I usually don't go into. So you guys are going to get some new education tonight. So we're talking about movement and how it affects your brain. Well, we're going to go into developmentally how it actually affects your brain. So you'll start understanding why we do what we do when we train you. Like one of the things I'm going to go through is, well, why, when I started, did I have to do this paintbrush thing? I'm actually going to explain that to you tonight. Why we actually look at the paintbrush, what it's actually showing me, and then what we do with that and what it's actually helping you stabilize. And it's a lot bigger than you may be aware of. We're also going to look at some different frequencies. There's specifically a frequency that is only found in the motor cortex in the brain. We're going to go over that. And we're going to go over some brain development. If we get a little extra time and go into any questions and so forth.
We always have extra time.
Oh, always extra time, right?
Tons of time.
All right. So what we're going to look at, and as always, thank you for being here. Thank you for coming with an open heart and open mind. Thank you for learning so you can help somebody else. That's my goal and my prayer with each person that's here is, yes, I want you all to get better. That's implied. That's implicit. Yes, we want that. But I want you to go a step further and change somebody else's life. I want to teach you something so that you can help somebody else. I want to give you a fire or a flame, and then you can help them change their life and they can see a truth or a reality that's different to what people live in. Because a lot of people will get stuck not even knowing that things are possible. And I'll give you an example. I had a fellow come in here, and when he came in, he actually crawled in. So he loved playing tennis. And he had, through tennis, been really abrasive to his low back. Really, really abrasive. And when we took an x-ray, his low back, the disc height should be like this, and his was about 5% of that. So not any good. He had consulted other practitioners, and he was told fusion. The only way you're going to get better. And he said, nope, I don't want that, because he had seen what had happened to his friends. They had gone that way and they couldn't play tennis anymore. Or they had gone that way and then they were on medication. It's like painkillers for the rest of their lives. So he didn't want that. He wanted something else. And this fellow, let's call him Greg. Greg came in and he was in. I said, this isn't going to be a quick thing. To rebuild this disc is not something that happens quickly. You're looking at like 2 to 3 years. And he's like, I'm in. As long as I can walk, I'm in. Within 6 months, we had him walking really well. He'd flare every once in a while. But within 3 years, we took an x-ray, and he had regrown 60% of his disc. So I actually have the pre and post x-ray on this. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because people are stuck in concepts that your body can't heal because it's stuck this way. You're genetically programmed. You'll just fall apart. That's what you're told. That's what you're told on media all the day. So here's all the days, like my daughter says. So here's the interesting part. So I had a orthopedic surgeon, a retired orthopedic surgeon come in. And he actually had low back pain, but he didn't want to get surgery because he actually knew the side effects. And I said, yeah, discs can regrow. And he goes, no, that's impossible. I go, okay, you want to see the x-ray? And I showed him the x-ray. And I never saw this guy again, but he literally left the room muttering and never came back because I had just disproven with clinical data that you can regrow a disc. So this is what's possible. And I'm bringing this up not because it's a disc, but because things can happen outside of what you think is possible. Just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean it can't happen. These things happen routinely in the world. We just need to understand that maybe we don't see the bigger picture. We don't understand everything. So with that being said, we're going to be looking at the brain and how it develops. We're looking at the brain from the side. Here's the base of the brain. Here's the top of the brain, the back, the front. And this little area here, we never really talk about that one, right? That's called the cerebellum. So cerebellum is little brain, and it actually is the coordinator of movement. The cerebellum coordinates how fast or slow you actually move your arm or a muscle. So it is the master coordinator of all the things that move in your body. The movements start in the top in the motor cortex and are sent down, and then the cerebellum literally speeds up, slows down, whatever movements you have. So if we want to get to the simple nitty gritty, what parts of the brain are the big ones that are related to movement? Cerebellum, motor cortex. And then in front of the motor cortex, you're going to have the premotor cortex, and we'll get into that. But that's basically how this works is you think about it, your brain figures out, so your brain thinks about it. I want to move my arm. Then the motor cortex says, well, these are the action steps to move the arm. It sends the program down to the cerebellum, and the cerebellum actually does it. So these are all the areas that are really, 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 really important. But what we have to look at is how is the brain developed and how do these movements actually work to determine why we do what we do? Why do we train you in certain ways? So let's think about how a baby develops. So baby's born, and then the first thing you're going to see them doing is lifting up their head a little and gaga-gooing. And that's all movement. Those are actually very specific movements. So those are actually the movements that are triggered when you're talking. That's fine motor. So that's going to be the top of the brain telling the cerebellum to move little muscles. Fine motor is harder to control than gross motor. Gross motor is big movements. But have you ever noticed with a kid, there are things we can do, and everybody does it, but they don't know why. Well, actually, I do know why now with one of them. Have any of you taken your finger and put it in the palm of the baby's hand? And then the baby closes his hand. Do you know what you're actually doing there? Any ideas? It's called the palmar reflex. So it's actually a reflex. It's not a movement the baby is aware of. So just like you can have the reflex, the patella, where you kick, and that's a spinal cord, the palmar is a reflex that is called a primitive reflex, and they're supposed to be gone, all of them, by, depending on the book, 1.5 to 3 years of age. So why do humans like doing that? When you do that and it closes, it actually gives you a dopamine and oxytocin rush. So it actually makes you feel happy when you do that. So there's an ingrained happy feeling when you put your finger in the baby's hand and it grasps you. Isn't that cool? That's really,
Makes
really
you
cool.
feel or the baby feel?
You feel.
Okay.
The baby is just reacting. Just like if I hit your kneecap or not your kneecap, your patella, your foot will push, or right below your kneecap, your reflex will happen. It's the same thing. This is not something the baby's aware of. This is just a reflex. It's set up. So before those reflexes are reflexes called infantile withdrawal reflexes or withdrawal reflexes. What do those mean? It means on the baby, in the tummy, when it's growing, at 6 weeks of age, that means it's literally smaller than a marble. There are reflexes that will actually happen when fluid moves over the child's face or hands. Okay, so what does that mean? These are priming reflexes. So these are things that set up the pathways in the brain and the spinal cord to make sure that you will actually interact with the environment correctly. So what does that mean? It means you're like, well, the baby like kicks and the baby moves, and why does it do all that? It's literally the fluid, the amniotic fluid going over the face is what's causing that to happen. Going over the hands. So these are priming reflexes. They set everything up. They make the nerve system fire, basically. So think about this. Fluid goes over the face. Is that very abrasive? Is that a lot of pressure? No, it's light, right? So what do I have to do to mimic that in an adult? I take a paintbrush and I put it over your face, on your hands.
No way.
If you feel it, that reflex is active, and that means we are dealing with a rudimentary, so low, we can't go any lower. That's 6 weeks of gestation, really early. That is actually running your life. That is how you're processing the world. So, well, I do these things and I don't understand it, or my immune system does these funky things, I don't understand it. That's because we're operating at a before birth brainstem level. That's scary. That's why we will see emotional reactions. That's why we'll see all these different aspects. So that movement will prime the brain to develop, but what is the part of the brain that actually inhibits it is the cerebellum. So what we do is when we have you actually move it, we train different parts of the brain. And we train that part of the brain that will drive it up, the cerebellum. And then guess what? It goes away, the feeling. Now, this is the genius part behind this. When you do this and you don't have neurofeedback training, it will take on average 6 to 9 months to integrate those trainings. That's what I've seen with all my kids before I started doing neurofeedback training. I just had a kid last week who did it in a week, all of them. Isn't that crazy? Because now that means the brainstem is actually stable. The part of the brain that's helping to control blood sugars, helping to control respiration, all these different things. So when you add in the neuro, you can literally get huge results because you can actually train the brain to stabilize. Any questions on that?
When it's taking longer than I'm happy with, what's going on?
So when it's taking longer than I'm happy with, what's happening is we have one of multiple factors that could be going on. Well, when you say longer than you're happy with, does that mean it resides on me longer, or I have it and it goes away and it comes back and it goes away and it comes back?
Yeah.
Then what we're dealing with is either chronic inflammation. Well, no, it is chronic inflammation, but then we have to see what the driver is. What are the 3 things that cause stress in our life? Chemical, emotional, and physical. So what's the driver? The lowest hanging fruit one is, what are we eating? That's chemical. What are we exposed to? What kind of gases or formaldehydes or toxins are we exposed to? Nothing perfect. What kind of emotional stress do we have? All of these things. Because if we stabilize and then it starts coming back, like the next time, it's telling me we have an underlying inflammatory process that's not being resolved. Because what happens is when we train this, we make new neural connections. The neural connections inhibit the problem. If it starts coming back, it means those connections are fraying. That make sense? So there are other exercises you can do. Movement in general will help you inhibit those reflexes. That's why people who walk and move and interact are going to do better. They're going to deal better with stress management. So you're like, well, I want this thing to go away quicker. Figure out what's stressing you. Well, I don't know what it is. Okay. Then start looking at what are the things that I'm eating that could be having problems? What are the chemicals that I'm exposed to? What are the viruses that I've had? What are the emotional stresses that I've had? Like we now have, through a lab called Cyrex, an ability to literally test hundreds of foods, both raw and cooked, the most reactive ones, everything besides pollens, and know if those foods are actually triggering an immune reaction. So let's say you're somebody who's unlucky enough to have, let's say, Hashimoto's, an autoimmune disease of your thyroid. There is direct proof now in research that Hashimoto's people, if they eat avocados, can actually trigger Hashimoto reactions. Because there's a cross reaction with a thing called latex haven. So if you're like, well, I'm just at wit's end, I don't know what it is, then we can do a test like that. Or we can do a test to see if heavy metals are causing it, or if viruses and pathogens and bacteria or funguses or molds, different things like that are causing it. So you can see all these other things, but if it's going away, come back, going away, come back, it tells me there's something interfering with you staying in that healed state. Does that make sense? So it could be neuroinflammation. Well, it definitely is. Well, what's driving that? Any questions on that? Make sense? Perfect. All right. So then we look at, well, how does the brain develop? It develops from the bottom to the top, back to the front. The key is to understanding here. This develops, cerebellum develops, and then the motor cortex and how you communicate develop. That's basically how the motor thing works. It's top of the brain, talks to cerebellum, and then puts the input out down the spinal cord. And if you move correctly, you inhibit those stress responses. If you don't move correctly, you get more stress. If your body, and this is where it gets really interesting, so they've done research nowadays through Dr. Havoc, and they've shown that if you have a joint that is fixated out of position, it will interfere with how your brain perceives reality. So you go, what does that mean? It will change anywhere in your spine. It will change how you see, hear, smell, taste, touch, experience emotions, experience everything. It will change. Remember that first part I said, fixated out of position? That's a subluxation. So it means if your body is misaligned neurologically, it can make you physically misaligned. And that can literally interfere with how the information comes in and out. And then the feedback loop gets broken. And then as a byproduct, you can't heal because you can't see the world for what it is. You're going to be overreactive to something, emotional, environmental something. So we want to make sure we get good information in. So that's why the adjustment is really powerful, is it actually reboots how the brain perceives the reality, which then changes how your body moves. So, any questions on that?
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, sir.
To maintain your level, how frequently should you do it per week to have adjustments?
So the question is, how often should you get adjusted? This is lifestyle dependent. So the simple answer is once a week if you have mild emotional, physical, chemical stress. If, on the other hand, you are dealing with a government agency, or you're dealing with a spouse, or that's something bad, or you're dealing with whatever, the more the merrier. You have to up and down regulate your care based on your lifestyle, not based on your symptoms. What the adjustment and physical movement actually do, the end stage of neurodevelopment is your prefrontal cortex, which is everything here. And that controls stress management, that controls executive function, how you feel, how you think, how you move, all that stuff. Every time you get adjusted, this works better. You actually make more connections here. That's the big kahuna. Every time you move, it'll stimulate this, but not to the same degree. So most people aren't aware, every time you get adjusted, you connect 10 to 100, 10,000 to 100,000 neurons. Now you have trillions, but 10,000 to 100,000 connections. What is a connection? Each connection is a function. Well, what is a function? Moving something, thinking of something, being able to react, whatever it is. That make sense? So you get adjusted and then you keep moving or doing neurotraining and you reinforce it and it stays. And then the next time you get adjusted, it stays longer and everything starts staying. And this is why we see a compounding effect with people over long-term care. There's one study out of the National Institute of Health that showed that for every put it this way, for every 3 people that are under chiropractic care, they cost the equivalent of 1 person not under chiropractic care. Let's put it another way. If 3 people are receiving chiropractic care, it costs the government $3,000. If 1 person is not seeing chiropractic care, it costs the government $3,000. Isn't that crazy? That's because the frontal lobe works better. So how often should you come? It's based on how stressed your life is. You're a day trader, we're going to want to see you twice a day. Business owner, we're going to want to see you more often. Stay-at-home mom, no stress, kids are gone, and all you're worried about is where you can give away money, maybe once a week. You see what I'm saying here? It's really based on that. And then it also is dependent on what kind of stress we're driving in with. Yes, emotional is big, but are we, in our, let's say you're a 60-year-old and what you want to keep playing pickleball. Then I'm probably going to want to see you 2 to 3 times a week because you're beating yourself up by jumping around all the time trying to hit that pickleball. Whereas if you're moving but you're not doing as a high impact sport, it's easier on you. So it's really case dependent. So I can't tell you definitively, but if you're really stressful, the more we see you, the better. If you're not that stressed, we can get by once a week. Me personally, I play hockey, that's stressful. I go skiing, that's stressful. You ever tried, well, I don't know, some of you probably have, the new little wraps that you hold onto your kid and it's a little vest and you have to snowplow all the way down? One run like that is like skiing a half a day. Like literally it's the most tiring thing ever because you're going down the hill braking the whole time. That's what I do with my daughter. So for me personally, I get adjusted at least twice a week. Minimum for the rest of my life. Just because of the fact that I have a stressful life and I've had, 9 head injuries. And I still like to play hockey and I do all these other things. Is that making sense? So for me, it's preventative. It's how long can I keep that frontal lobe working correctly so I can stay healthy? And movement is what drives that. Adjusting that segment that isn't moving correctly will actually drive that brain to work correctly. All right, so what is the special brainwave that I was talking about? This is probably going to be a Jeopardy question after this, so you guys are going to want to know this. So there's a brainwave. We've all heard of beta, right? And alpha. But did we know there's one called SMR? SMR is a brainwave only found in the motor cortex. And it stands for sensory motor rhythm. Now, if we remember, beta is 13 to 38. Alpha is 8 to 12. Guess what SMR is? It is 12 to 15 hertz. It is very, very important for you to understand this. This frequency is only found in the motor cortex. So it's only found in the middle part of the brain that controls how you make movements. Not how fast you make them, but how you perceive them and make them. So that frequency, SMR, is only at the motor cortex, and it is 1 1/5 alpha and the rest beta. So it goes 12, which is alpha, 13, 14, 15. So 1/4 beta. So 1/4 alpha, 3/4 beta. That's what SMR is. And it's only found in the motor cortex, and it only controls motor function. So it drives literally how quickly you process. This is the frequency that is not working correctly if you have balance issues. This is the frequency that is not working correctly if you have movement disorders. This is the frequency that isn't moving correctly if you have 9 times out of 10 ADD. So you're not processing quick enough. Didn't even get to what I wanted. I got to one of the 3 things. All right, so if we know somebody who has food sensitivities, think of them right now. If we know somebody who has chemical sensitivities, think of them right now. And you go, what's a chemical sensitivity? Well, I can't wear lotions. I can't put on this kind of jewelry. I can only wear 14 karat gold. I can't wear nickel. That's a chemical sensitivity. Or if we know somebody who has tactile sensitivities, that's don't touch my back or I'll freak out. Don't touch my ear. I just can't handle that. All of those are indications that that person's brainstem is overactive and they're prone to autoimmune, overreactivity, and so forth. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but children who have spectral disorders are always allergic to stuff. That's because their brainstem is not stabilized, and it's caused their immune system to overreact, and they actually started attacking the food and the environment they live in. So why I'm bringing this up is if you are allergic to things, food, environment, touch, that's literally telling me that you're stuck in old brain and not in new brain. And we need to stabilize old brain to get you to new brain so you can heal. And if we get it early enough, it won't turn into autoimmune. But if you have sensitivities, you're already telling me you're priming yourself to set up to turn into autoimmune where you attack yourself. So if you have chemical intolerances, you can't be exposed to perfumes and stuff, that's a huge marker. Food intolerances, another huge marker. Then you're literally just steps away from self-intolerance, which means you attack yourself. That's autoimmune. So if you know anybody who has those issues, you want to get them help very soon, or it will turn quickly into a bigger problem. Quickly into something that can never go away. So we want to help them before it gets there. That make sense? So how does movement affect the brain? It literally calms it. So you're stressed out, go for a walk. You're stressed out, get adjusted. You're stressed out, do something to move so that the top of your brain can talk to the cerebellum and the cerebellum can turn off that brainstem so you get less problems. Think of a friend or family member or an acquaintance or anybody you know that has any of those intolerances and let them know there are ways to help them. There are ways to get help before it turns into something bigger. Because most people don't know, just like most people don't know arthritis is an autoimmune, most people don't know that not being able to eat a food is a huge blinking red light saying, stop this before it turns into you attack yourself. Or I can only wear this kind of jewelry and not that one because I get rashes and stuff. Another one telling me we got to stop this before it turns into I attack myself. So think of that person and you can let them know our next PAD is March 20th. That week of the 20th is the Thursday, but that week we're going to be doing the Patient Appreciation Week, and that's when you can get the exam at that $20 fee. And if they want to get in earlier, that's fine. But that's my way of giving back to all of our people.
This March?
March 20th is the actual day where you get food and drink. That Monday through that Thursday is the PAD week. Are we all good? Do we have any questions? Yes,
Yeah, roughly what percentage of chiropractors do what you do, for example?
none. I'm the only one. I invented half the stuff you guys get. So if you're like, well, I want my friend to go see him, I'd have to teach them. So the half the neuro programs you get, I literally invented. The functional med stuff, you can find doctors who do that, but they usually don't do the neurological on top of it. They're gonna push a lot of supplements, but they're not gonna do the neurological stabilization. So what percentage? Less than 1. So I know myself, I get all the people who are the gurus, all their failed patients come to me. So it's not me bragging, it's just I keep trying to figure out why somebody has MS and why it doesn't get better, or why somebody has ADD and it won't get better. Why doesn't it get better? There's always an answer. You can't tell me it's just the way it is. There's an answer, let's find it. So we try to find the answer, and that's why.
Okay.
So and when you run into it, you're like, well, I have a friend and they live in, let's say, Atlanta. Who would they have to go to? To get the same care that you get here, they would have to do this. Go get adjusted, then drive to their neuro guy or gal, get neurofeedback training, and then drive to their functional medical doctor, and then figure out what they're going to do to make the inflammation go down. And that trip of going to all those different things will usually take somebody 2 to 3 hours to get what you can get here in 30 minutes. Yes.
But it also has to be the neurological adjustment.
Yes. So Sarah's bringing up the care of the adjustment that you get as well as neurological based. So that's the functional neuro adjustment as well. So that's a hemispherical adjustment. And the doctors I know maybe 20 docs who do that, but they don't reinforce it with the neurobiofeedback. So that's why you guys get the changes in such quick timing. And then the form of neurotraining we do, which is called brain driving, I'm the only one in the state that does it. And there's one other doctor I trained in Georgia that does it similar to me, but he doesn't do the neurological based care. He doesn't do the neurological based adjusting. So it's really hard to get the changes because you have to compound so many things. Does that make sense? So that's why when you say, well, people fly in, yeah, it's literally because when they're at the end of the rope, they'll do anything, go anywhere, and then they get results. To answer your question.
Yeah.
Perfect.
It helps.
Excellent. Thank you guys for being here. Have a blessed night.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks.